What is up, Metalheads? While at the GameExpo in San Antonio, I had the pleasure of meeting Nolan Create. Nolan Create is a 3D printer that is licensed to also print the STL files for Fat Dragon Games. While I was there, I saw that he had a demon dice tower that I just absolutely had to paint. Be sure to check out Nolan Create, as they also do other tabletop gaming pieces and figures that you can use for D&D and other games. There's a picture of me doing some cleanup on the piece using an X-Acto, and a picture of me getting ready to get into some paint shenanigans. Let's check it out.
Starting off by doing some cleanup on this. I started cleanup on it a while ago yesterday. There's already a good hour and a half worth of cleanup that's been done to it. I've been using my X-Acto knife and I've been using hobby nippers to do it. It's mostly just little support pieces from the 3D print. But I'm not going to bore you with hours worth of this, but mostly there was like little filament pieces that were in between the bricks. There's some in the corner here that I'm going to easily take out with nippers. There were some support parts that were in here that I clipped out with nippers, but on the other side there's a couple, but they're really thick, so I'm not really going to mess with those because I don't want to mess up the integrity of the print, because this is going back to Patrick, who's the owner of Nolan Create. But here's what it looks like, mostly all cleaned up, and then I will do the next part of the video showing the next step, which will be base coating. Alright, just gonna check it out there. There we go. Alright, so once in a while, you, as an artist, you go through this thing where you're at a place, you could be at a friend's house, a convention, somewhere, and you see that there's something that they have that's paintable, that you sit there and you say to yourself, I need to paint this. It's a good spark of inspiration that comes to you, and it's very healthy to feed that need when it happens, especially when you're a commission painter. If you do commissions on a professional basis full time and you don't feed those healthy needs that come through, then you'll end up burning out and not wanting to paint for your job. So basically, this is one of those times that came for me. I'm currently at GameExpo in San Antonio, and there is a 3D printing company called Nolan Create. They are a licensed printer for Fat Dragon Games, and that's where they get their STL files from. So this is a 3D printed dice tower, and it's a demon dice tower, and I think it's so freaking awesome. Okay, so one of the cool things about this specific piece, I'm stepping on leaves, and I'm outside here in the parking lot, so that's why you hear echo and everything else going on. But the cool thing about this is that this is put together with what's called Dragon Lock. And Dragon Lock is where you can basically just easily just shimmy really gently to get the piece off. And then it has these hook-ons, and then here's the other side, and then you insert the one piece into the other and just gently, and then it snaps together. And that's how this dice tower is put together. Now, I already cleaned it up. I used an X-Acto knife and I used hobby nippers, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like a sandstone kind of color on this, so it's not the typical gray that everybody sees. But I have with me some GW shades in Seraphim Sepia, Rycliffe Flush Shade, Agrax Earth Shade, because you gotta have Agrax Earth Shade, and then I have a couple of pigment powders and some other paint colors that I'm going to use to put in this to bring this to life. At least that's my plan. So I have here, I had some leftover Xandri dust from an army that I painted a while back, so we're going to use that today to base coat this. So you want to make sure to shake this well. I'm in a spot in the parking lot where it's not near any cars or anything, so there's no overspray. I'm far enough away from everything that no overspray is going to hit these cars. So, and if it hits anything else over here, it's going to hit leaves, and nobody cares about that. So, I have it on one of my trays from the shop, and I'm spraying. And I'm using, and the GW sprays are great because you can use them for both paint and prime. You can still put a primer underneath, and that is fine. But if you want to use it for both, especially when it comes to something like this with a 3D print, with the plastic filament and such, that's totally fine too. And instead of moving the dice tower so that my fingers don't touch it, I'm just going to move the tray itself. That's why I brought a tray, so that I could do that. And make sure to get underneath. There we go. Shake, shake, shake. Gotta keep shaking continuously so it keeps spraying correctly. And there's a little bit of wind going on, a little bit of a breeze. Nothing too crazy. That's another reason why I'm in here in the parking lot, is because if I was outside, then there would be too much of a breeze hitting, and it could possibly direct the color away from our 3D printed piece. And I'm making sure to get all the in-between, even though I know that the GW shades will get in there. But you still want to make sure to get in between everything too. And when things like this happen, like these sparks of inspiration, you got to feed it, because it also gives you a good excuse to actually use up the stuff that you have, such as extra cans of paint. And if I get in another commission with an army that has to use Xandri dust, I would rather use a fresh new can for that anyway. But that's just me. I'm weird like that. I like to use fresh new stuff for commission armies and stuff like that. Alright, so now I'm double checking myself. Being that there's a little bit of a breeze going on, it's been working to our advantage because it's been helping the paint dry quicker. But here, take a look at how the Xandri dust has this really nice natural khaki color, which is not only good for armies like Astra Militarum and stuff, but also when you're doing natural terrain pieces, natural colors like this, it's really, really good when you want to do earth tones and such. So that's why I picked it. Otherwise, if I was going to do all gray, then I would have done the zenithal priming thing and then went over with inks, but I wanted to do something a little different for this one. So let me show you. I'm going to lift the camera. So as you know, with 3D printing, that it just goes around and around to make certain pieces, and that's why you see that up at the top. When it comes to certain 3D printers, that can't be helped, although I know in technology there's a lot more advanced ones where you don't see those things. But that's why you see the little striations and the little circling and such. But we're still going to make this look really cool for Patrick, and it's going to make him really happy. He's really excited that I felt the need to paint this. But and you see here on the face too, all the striations and stuff. Let me see if I can move the camera so you can kind of see it. But yeah, but we're still going to make this look real cool for him. And I think he's going to be really excited. Alright, so now on to the next thing. I'm going to let this dry, and then we're going to start applying some shades on him. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start by doing the GW shade in Seraphim Sepia. Putting some on the palette there. I have a big cheap brush that I'm going to use to put it all on, bless you. People trying to spread plague while I'm trying to tape, but you know, whatever. I'm just kidding. Alright, so when you sit there and you use these shades, you want to go in sideways like this so that it gets in between the rocks. You want to go up and down too so it gets on the rocks, but you want to definitely make sure to go this way and up and down so that it gets in between. So this is going to take a little bit, but that's also why I'm using a cheapy brush, because I know that it'll beat the crap out of the brush after I finish doing all this. And so that's another great excuse to do these kind of projects. So then we're going to see how this is going to come out. I'm about to use a lot of Seraphim sepia on this, and thank goodness I buy this stuff in bulk and then put them in large bottles. And then if you put a little too much in one spot, what was it? Oh yeah, no, it's gonna beat up the brush and everything, but that's fine because these are like cheapy brushes, and when you do big pieces like this, the best thing to do is use like a cheap, big cheap brush, yeah. And then we're just making sure to get in between. And it might not look like much is going on now, but when this dries, then there's going to be another ink put over it, another shade rather put over it, and that next layer will adhere onto this layer. So you'll start seeing something happen, you'll see. Camera and move it around so you guys can see. The Seraphim sepia is currently drying, and like I said, its intended purpose, why I put it, is to add a little more color to the stone. There's a reason why I didn't put Seraphim sepia on the head, and that's going to be for another fun part of this. But as you can see here, I coated it, and I took the brush and moved it in all different directions to try and get it in as much of the cracks as I can. Now, if you don't get it in all of them, if you do this yourself, it's not a big deal, because you're going to use other shades if you do something like this, and those will all eventually come together and cover all the cracks and crevices and all that good stuff. Ooh. We made sure to get the top too, of course. And I had to do a little more cleaning up on the bottom tray where the dice fall, but that's all good. So that's all fixed. Now we're gonna move on to the next color, which I believe I am going to use. I'm gonna put the camera down now. There we go, so I can move on to the next color. Moving the camera a bit so you can focus. There we go. Got this slate at Dibble's Hobbies. It was like 15 bucks. You can also get them from Bobby's Hobby. If you end up seeing Bobby's Hobby at a show, just get it from them too, and they have the same thing and it's the same price. There's not good lighting in the convention center here, so just so you know. But for the next color, I believe I am going to do, whoops, after I finish throwing it, of course, Anthonian Camo Shade. Or Athonian Camo Shade. Athonian or Anthonian? Athonian Camo Shade. And I'm going to pour it into the palette. It's going to be a lot of it used. There was quite a bit of the Seraphim sepia that was used. This is going to add some grit and dirt and more natural, because in nature with stone, as they age, there'll be some greens and browns in it. So that's why we're going to make sure to put some green in it. But look how much of the Seraphim sepia was used. I think it was up to here or something, and there was quite a bit used. See, now you know why I buy this stuff in bulk. And you should too. Same drill. Just go through, cover the whole thing. It's going to be highlighted and everything, so if it looks darker, don't worry about it. And you could sit there and you go both ways to get in between the cracks. You can even go round and round with the brush this way if you want to as well, and that works in some parts. Now we're going to put the Athonian Camo Shade. I'll say the name right at one point. Don't know when, but yeah, some parts I'll go round and round with the brush just to get it in. And you apply it liberally. Nothing in nature is perfect, so it does not have to be completely and evenly applied. You can put it a lot in some places, little in others, and still be able to maintain that more natural look. I'm trying to move it over a little bit, hopefully it'll like the lighting. You see how that's adding a little more to it? It's got some brown, but you're seeing some greenish to it as well. Got to make sure to get inside in the corners there. And you can see it beats up the brush, so use your big cheapies for this. Alright, so I put the Athonian Camo Shade on the rocks. And you can see there's more. I'm trying to move the camera around while it's on the stand. You can see it's getting a little darker. Put it in at the top over there too. I have it on all sides. I'm trying to put it so I can see the light. And patient zero still spreading the plague. Just kidding. Alright, but yeah, I'm getting pretty happy with this. And the next color that I'm going to do is the Reichland Flesh Shade, which is a red-brown. I'll show you that once this dries. So, as you know, we finished the Athonian Camo Shade. It used up about about a third of this large bottle. So if this was equivalent to a small bottle, it would take up just about all of it. Just so that you know, in case you do one of the same size for yourself. Now next, we're going to do some of the Reichland Flesh Shade. Reichland Flesh Shade is great because it has some red in it. So that will contrast with the green in the Athonian Camo Shade. And then Reichland Flesh Shade also has brown in it, so it'll still maintain some of that natural look. And I'm just gonna go round and round with the brush on this one. Inside and up. Get it in between. Get it, get it, get it. Take some of the excess off. And if you do it too liberally on some areas, you just manipulate the paint and push it to go to another part and spread it around until you're happy with it. So now I'm going to continue on with that Reichland Flesh Shade, and then I'll show you the results. You can still be here if you want. Okay, so I finished doing the Reichland Flesh Shade on the stone there. Now again, there's a really fun thing that I'm going to do with the head. And I was going to go over next with Agrax Earthshade, but I'm thinking I'm happy with the amount of shading that I did using the Seraphim Sepia, going over it with the Athonian Camo Shade, and then going in with the Reichland Flesh Shade. I feel like there's enough shading that's been done on this, and so I'm afraid if I go in with the Agrax Earthshade that it might end up making it too dark, which is not what I want to do. So now what I'm going to get ready to do next is I'm going to do some dry brushing on the rock, and then I'm going to work on the demonic head in the front. So let's see what kind of fun we can get into doing next. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Now I'm going to get ready to start doing some dry brush highlighting on this dice tower. Let me put this brush aside because I don't need it right now. I'm going to use this old GW brush in order to do this dry brush. It is a large dry brush. I've had this one for years. And using a beat up ball brush is basically the way to go. So for those of you who don't know what dry brushing is, basically I'm going to use Reaper's Golden Ballon to do some highlighting on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to thin the paint. I'm going to put it on my porcelain palette that I have with me. I'm going to do just a little at a time because I'm right by an air vent, so that's making the paint dry a lot faster. Make sure that the brush is relatively clean, otherwise if there's other colors on here from previous paint sessions, it can possibly end up going on the surface and you might not want that. So what you do when you're doing dry brushing is you put a little bit at a time on the brush, because I'm trying to be careful with this, like I don't want it to be gummed up on there too much. And then you take off the excess on a napkin. I'm just using a Starbucks napkin until the paint is almost gone. Your objective is to do it gently to get the raised areas of the surface. So for example here, I'm going to sit there, and since this is rock, it doesn't matter so much if you go in only one direction. You can go diagonally and up and down and side by side in order to catch as much of the raised surface area as possible. And you'd be surprised, the pigment that's on a dry brush for dry brushing can actually last you quite a bit of time. And I know the lighting here isn't very optimal, and in convention centers and stuff it usually isn't, to be completely honest. And you can use different colors too, like you can use not just golden blonde, but you can use grays and you can use skin tones. You'd be surprised when you do stone and you do certain skin tones, like if I did bronze skin tone or a tan. Thank you for the extra light. That's thanks to Matt. And the reason why this is shaking like this is because I have it on a paper plate, so that way it doesn't mess up anything on the hotel table, because they kind of frown upon the fact that we come in here painting in the first place. And if there's any parts where I end up feeling like I did too much paint, like if, for example, if I don't like what I did in this area, I could always go back over with some of the GW shade. But to be honest with you, I am purposely doing this way because I want some areas to be more highlighted than others. And I'm handling the brush this way so that way you could see a little better what it is that I'm doing. But in actuality, like, I'll be holding it more like this and holding on to the piece. Probably feel like you're on a boat as much as this is rocking because it's on a paper plate. And you can go up and down, and you can go diagonally when it's rock, sideways. It doesn't really matter when it comes to this stuff. But the next clip I'll show you is the finished product of using this color, and then we'll move on to the next one and then start working on the demon head. Oh, shut up. All right, so I did some dry brushing with the golden blonde, and I purposely did not do it like all fully. I was very deliberate in making it somewhat random, so that, because nature-wise, you don't want your, sorry, I'm moving the camera around a bit, but you don't want stone, like natural stone, to be very uniform. And so that's why you only see it. You see it mostly, but not too much. I'm also getting ready to put a couple of other colors in for dry brushing, which is going to be Reaper Master Series in Turf Green, to add a little green to it. That's going to be kind of random. And then I'm going to put Reaper Master Series in Aged Bone and do some dry brushing with that color. And that's just to add a little more to it and then work on the demon head. Alright, so I did dry brushing. I did some Reaper Master Series in Turf Green, just a little bit in some random places. I didn't do it fully, like you might see some of it under here. Hopefully I could fix the lighting using the video editing. So cross your fingers on that. But I did some more dry brushing. I used Aged Bone. I did a little more of that than the golden blonde, just to add more stone highlighting. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some pigment powder into the most shadowed areas. I have with me Secret Weapon in Dark Earth, and then I also have Scale 75 in green. So we're going to mess around with some of that. I'm going to move the camera a little bit. Sorry about all the moving. Don't be dizzy. Just stay with me, people. Stay with me. I'm going to take this little hobby light over here, move this back a little. Use an old brush when playing with pigment powders. Seriously, use old brushes. So what I'm going to use to put the pigment binder, I cleaned this brush. This is the one that I used for all the GW shades. And I'm going to use this to put the pigment binder in certain areas. I'm not putting pigment powder all over. I'm going to do it all inside here, the brown and the dark earth and the green. And under here mostly is where you're going to see it. And inside where the dice tray is, okay? So to apply, I'm going to start with this Vallejo pigment binder. I really like this stuff. I also like using Secret Weapons pigment fixer. Pardon all the noise, there's people that are, you know, getting ready to go. It's not that busy of a con, it's one of the smaller events and stuff, so some vendors end up leaving early. So I put some pigment binder and I'm putting it under here, all around. It dries relatively quick, so now I'm gonna go right in. Here's the scale 75, the moss green pigment powder. And here is Secret Weapon in Dark Earth. And the cool thing is about pigment powders, they can be a little messy, but they're fun to work with. So I'm opening them up and I'm putting them kind of in a separate spot, so that way I don't make too much of a mess and less chance of knocking them over. So I'm gonna go in first with some Dark Earth, and I'm gonna kind of mix these pigment powders around. And I'm gonna take with the pigment binder and I'm just gonna kind of brush it in with this old brush and just brush it in. And I'm not trying to be neat with it because realistically it would not be neat. And so I went in with the brown. Now I'm gonna dip my brush in the green moss, the moss green, whatever. And you just tap on the brush to take off the excess, kind of like you would with putting on makeup. That's if you put on makeup. I know not all of you do. And take the green and also brush that in and not make it even. Doesn't have to be even. And also over here, I'm gonna dip some more green. Tap the brush, get off the excess, and spread it around. And be deliberate and, you know, put it in other areas too where it would be underneath. Like there would be some green underneath here and under here. And if there's no pigment binder in certain areas, that's fine, because when this gets matte sealed with spray, you could actually seal this pigment powder in as well. So if you end up like missing a step in certain areas, like, oh, I'm gonna give this a dusting, but how's it gonna stay? The matte sealer, if you spray on some sealer, will do it too. Tester's Dull Coat also works just as well. So now I'm gonna put another, I'm dipping the brush into the pigment binder a little bit. I'm going underneath here. Put a touch under there. And you see I'm moving in an arc, I'm following along. And I'm going into the Dark Earth. Oops, I put a lot of pigment powder, but that's okay. You just tap it along the edge. Tap off the excess, you heard me do that. Then you hear the styrofoam plate. I'm gonna hold that down because that sound kind of gets to me. And just like you're rubbing around some dirt. There's a DJ here, I forgot to mention, I believe Tiny Events is what they're called. You might have seen me post about that a bunch of us were singing along to an 8-bit version of Bohemian Rhapsody. That was him that played that, and a bunch of us, every single one of us actually, in the vendor room was singing along with that. It was really cool. Then it seemed that he kept going back to different Queen songs to try and recreate that magic, but it just you can't recreate that kind of magic. Camera's on if you want to say hi to everybody, since you're the one that printed this.
There's a lot of detail pops out there a lot more when you hit it with that white.
Oh, when I did the dry brushing? Yeah, that's what it, yeah, that's the good thing about.
That much detail in there.
Oh yeah, see? And that's the cool thing about doing things like dry brushing, and is that it helps bring out detail. Adding the shades, like the GW shades when I did it, that also helps add in detail as well, because it makes detail stand out. Put some Dark Earth.
Really good.
Thank you. Not too much longer on it. When you get home, you're gonna have to, you know, whatever, you're gonna have to seal it, spray sealer on it, yeah. I didn't bring any with me, partially because I forgot or whatever, but I figured you had sealer at home anyway, because I know you paint. You can hit it with satin if you want. I mean, I'd suggest matte, but if all you have is satin, that's fine too.
I should have done matte as well.
Whichever.
I know I've got an acrylic there and matte.
Alright, so that way you guys can see, because the lighting conditions are so awful here. But this is how it looks. And you just purposely be messy with it. As you can see, I also spread it around some of the gargoyles. I've got goblins. Gargoyles. So get that too. Get in the cracks there. I was planning on adding some after with that too, but actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it and mentioning it, I'll just do it now. Boop, right in there. And I just spread the pigment binder. Spread it. Now I'm making up words. And you just spread it around. And it looks like I'm painting it on, which in essence I kind of am, but like it's a little more like dust. And then you just keep going back and forth with the colors. You can go back and forth with them until you're happy with it. See that? Hopefully you guys can see that okay. But just to give you a comparison, here's with the pigment powder in it to show it that it's darker. And then here's what it looks like without. And you see how it looks kind of flat. But that's why I go in. And I'll just show you here. And I just do a line just down there. And you don't want to put too much, so there's a little excess, so I just pulled that off. And then you take the earth. And you could either paint it on or dab it in. You could dab it in like this too, and that works. Then go in with the green. I like that this moss green is a little on the bright side. Add some patina. You could just sit there and just randomly. And then you can go in with a brush and kind of like the dry brush and just go back over it just to kind of lighten, cover it up, kind of get all Bob Ross on it and shit. See, I'm just going all random on it. Just clean it off. And then I'm going to go back in with dark earth. So it's not all green, otherwise it'll be too bright. I'm hoping when I do the video editing, because the lighting in here is so awful, that I'll be able to go in and fix the lighting on this, you know?
It's like they purposely make lighting terrible.
I mean, and it happens in pretty much every convention center. It's not just here. It's not like it's their fault or anything, but yeah, no, it's pretty much all of them are like that. There you go. And you want to be purposely just stick pigment powder in certain places. Never be afraid of pigment powder. That's usually the problem, is a lot of people get afraid of using pigment powder because they're afraid to get it into the wrong areas or that it'll get too messy in certain areas. Don't worry about it, because you can always fix and correct that. You should always, always, always have fun with pigment powders. They make metallic ones too. Oh yeah. That way it looks more natural. And then get it underneath there, because it's got to be shadowed, right? And then I got some on the gargoyles, so it looks like it rained over time on them. Love it. Just got to get this area now. Alright, so I took the pigment powders and put it in all the corners, the inside corners of the top. And I just kept switching around with the brush, and I didn't want it to be neat. You see it's in the cracks in there, and then underneath for the shadowing, underneath the arcs, or whatever you want to call them. I'm really hoping that the video editing program, the Filmora, will brighten it up so I can get the coloring right for you to show you. Otherwise, I'm going to be very disappointed if I can't show you. Now, for the last part, we're going to work on the demon head, the demonic head there. And I'm going to make this the part that'll stand out the most, and it'll be where the main focus will be, and it'll lead people to want to come and look at it. So let's see what we do. There's some progress on the demon head. Put some light on, a little light on the subject. Ooh. Almost done. And it's done. This is what I did on it. Did a Diablo looking face. Let me see if I can get some light on the subject there. I'm going to kind of lean it. And I did some Abaddon black. I did Reaper's Carnival red. Scale 75's Tiamat orange to highlight it. I used Reaper's leaf green, and then black again for in the eyes. And then I highlighted the horns with Reaper Master Series in Dusky Skin because it is a purplish gray. That way it wasn't just a stark gray. Just something to add a little something more to it. But that's what I wanted, was for the demonic. I wanted it to look like it's all stone, it's all stone. And then all of a sudden they're like, whoa. And then the focal point is in the face, which is where the dice come out of. So, hope you guys enjoy it. I surely had a good time doing this, and that's what I spent today doing. So whenever you sit there and you get a little spark of inspiration, you see something that you're like, hey, I need to paint this, it is definitely healthy to feed that need, and as an artist, you gotta do it. And that's sometimes where the coolest stuff comes out from, so like a happy accident, if you will. So be sure to follow us online, metalheadminis.com. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. Tell us what you think. And that's about it. So this is from GameExpo San Antonio at the Hilton Airport Hotel. And hope you guys enjoyed the video.